There exists a particular kind of ache that medicine cannot touch. It lives somewhere between your ribs and your throat, a heaviness that persists even when external circumstances align in your favor. You have tried the remedies that others swear by, scrolled through reassuring posts, sought wisdom from those who claim to have found peace. Yet the weight remains, subtle but undeniable, like a stone you have learned to carry without quite remembering when you first picked it up. What nobody tells you in those moments of quiet desperation is that the source of this persistent discomfort rarely originates where you think it does. The problem is not your difficult colleague, or your complicated family, or even the choices you made years ago that still whisper regrets in the dark. These are merely the stage props in a much deeper drama, one that unfolds entirely within the architecture of your own psyche. You have become a stranger to yourself. Somewhere along the journey from childhood to adulthood, between learning what was acceptable and what was forbidden, you began editing yourself. First, it was small adjustments, minor compromises made to belong. Then larger ones, fundamental aspects of your nature, pushed into shadows to maintain peace or secure approval. You learned to shape yourself according to invisible templates, molding your responses to fit expectations you never consciously agreed to follow. The person you present to the world is a careful construction. She says the right things at the right moments. He performs the appropriate emotions when circumstances demand them. This version of you has been refined over years of observation and adaptation, smoothed into something palatable, something that does not disrupt or demand too much attention. You have become skilled at this performance, so practiced that you barely notice the act anymore. But underneath, in a place that words struggle to reach, your original self still exists. That abandoned part knows it has been betrayed. It registers every moment when you swallow authentic reactions in favor of manufactured ones, when you ignore your own needs to service someone else's comfort, when you nod in agreement while something inside you screams in protest. This exiled aspect of your being has no voice in your daily decisions, yet it possesses a strange power nonetheless. The pain you cannot name is this buried self trying to get your attention. It manifests as restlessness during moments that should bring satisfaction, as the inexplicable urge to sabotage situations that others would consider fortunate, as the chronic sense that something essential is missing, even when you can point to nothing specific that is wrong. Your body knows what your mind refuses to acknowledge, that you are living someone else's life while your own goes unlived. Consider the tightness in your chest when you agree to things you do not want to do. Notice the exhaustion that arrives without physical cause, the way energy drains from you in certain company or situations. Pay attention to the moments when joy should arrive but does not, when success feels hollow, when connection leaves you feeling more isolated than before. These are not random afflictions or chemical imbalances requiring correction. They are urgent messages from the parts of you that have been silenced. The tragedy is not that you suffer. The tragedy is that you suffer without understanding why, searching for solutions to the wrong problems. You address symptoms while the disease goes untouched. You rearrange external circumstances while the internal architecture remains unchanged. Years pass this way, marked by cycles of hope and disappointment, brief improvements followed by familiar returns to that familiar ache. This disconnection from your authentic nature creates a particular kind of emptiness. It is not the emptiness of loss or absence, but rather the hollowness that comes from being present in your own life, only partially. You go through the motions with increasing efficiency, yet something crucial is always withheld. The enthusiasm you once felt has been replaced by obligation. Spontaneity has given way to calculated responses. You have traded aliveness for safety, and the cost of that transaction shows up as this persistent, nameless suffering. What makes this especially painful is that you cannot quite articulate what has been lost. You look around and see that you have what you were supposed to want, that you are doing what you were told would bring satisfaction. Yet satisfaction remains elusive. The promised contentment never arrives. Instead, there is this constant hum of wrongness, as though you are living in a key that does not quite match your natural frequency. The people around you likely have no idea. You have become extraordinarily talented at hiding this internal discord. Your smile is convincing. Your reassurances sound genuine. You have learned to function through the discomfort, to maintain productivity, even as something essential withers from neglect. This ability to keep going while falling apart inside is both your greatest strength and your deepest trap. But here is what changes everything. This pain is not your enemy. It is not a flaw in your character or evidence of weakness. This suffering is actually your psyche's last remaining tool for getting your attention, for forcing you to acknowledge what you have spent years trying to ignore. The discomfort persists because there is something you need to see, something crucial that requires recognition. Your authentic self, the one you abandoned in favor of acceptance, is still fighting for its right to exist. Every uncomfortable emotion, every moment of inexplicable anxiety, every wave of sadness without clear origin, is that buried part of you refusing to remain silent. The pain will continue until you find the courage to turn toward what you have been turning away from, until you are willing to acknowledge the parts of yourself that do not fit the image you have worked so hard to maintain. This is where the real work begins, not in acquiring new skills or achieving better circumstances, but in the dangerous act of becoming honest about who you actually are beneath all the performances and pretenses. The path forward demands something most people never give, a willingness to meet yourself without filters, without judgment, without the protective layers you have spent a lifetime constructing. The parts of yourself you have rejected do not simply disappear. They retreat into the unmarked territories of your inner world, accumulating in the darkness like sediment at the bottom of a lake. Everything you deemed unacceptable, every emotion you were taught to suppress, every desire you learned was wrong, all of it collects in this hidden realm. And from there, it continues to influence your life in ways you do not recognize. This concealed aspect operates like a second self, one you cannot see, but whose fingerprints appear everywhere. It is behind the rage that erupts over minor inconveniences, the inexplicable anxiety before moments of potential success, the pattern of choosing partners who will inevitably disappoint you. What appears random or unlucky is often this hidden force directing your choices, protecting you from risks it believes you cannot handle, punishing you for betrayals only it remembers. You wonder why you repeat the same mistakes, why certain situations trigger disproportionate reactions, why you find yourself in familiar painful dynamics despite promising yourself things would be different this time. The answer lies in what you refuse to acknowledge about yourself. Your denied anger masquerades as passive aggression. Your suppressed sexuality emerges as shame or compulsion. Your unacknowledged ambition disguises itself as resentment toward those who succeed. The mechanism is both simple and devastating. Every time you experience an emotion and tell yourself you should not feel that way every time, you have a desire and judge it as wrong every time. You notice something true about yourself and quickly look away. You feed this shadow version of who you are. It grows stronger with each denial, more determined to make itself known through increasingly dramatic means. Think about the last time you sabotaged something good in your life. Perhaps a relationship that was going well until you picked a fight over nothing. Maybe a job opportunity you talked yourself out of despite being qualified. The moment arrives when success or happiness seems possible, and suddenly you find reasons why it cannot work, why you are not ready, why the timing is wrong. This is not bad luck or poor judgment. This is the rejected parts of you ensuring you remain in familiar territory, keeping you small because at least smallness is known. Your body has been trying to tell you this for years. That knot in your stomach when you are around certain people is not indigestion. That inexplicable fatigue that descends when you should feel energized is not laziness. The headaches that arrive before important events, the tightness in your throat when you need to speak up, the heaviness in your limbs when you should be celebrating. These are not random physical complaints. They are coded messages from the parts of you that have been exiled. Most people treat these signals as problems to be fixed rather than information to be understood. You take something for the headache instead of asking what you are refusing to see. You push through the fatigue instead of questioning what you are exhausted from carrying. You dismiss the stomach pain instead of examining what you find difficult to digest about your current circumstances. The body speaks in symptoms because you have stopped listening to its language of sensation. Every emotion you push away becomes a debt you will eventually have to pay with interest. The anger you swallowed to keep the peace does not dissolve. It accumulates, building pressure until it explodes inappropriately or turns inward as depression. The grief you never allowed yourself to feel does not evaporate. It settles into your bones, weighing you down with a sadness you cannot trace to any specific loss. The fear you pretended not to have does not vanish. It transforms into anxiety that colors everything, making even safe situations feel dangerous. What makes this especially insidious is that you have convinced yourself you are protecting yourself through these denials. You believe that acknowledging certain truths about who you are would be catastrophic, that admitting to forbidden feelings or unacceptable desires would destroy the life you have built. So you keep them locked away, thinking you are maintaining control, not realizing that whatever you lock away eventually takes control of you. The hardest truth to accept is that you are not merely a victim of your suffering. You are also its architect. Not because you chose pain deliberately, but because you chose safety over authenticity, approval over honesty, comfort over growth. Every time you betrayed your genuine response in favor of an acceptable one, you tightened the trap. Every time you ignored your inner knowing to follow external expectations, you deepened the divide between who you are and who you pretend to be. This realization can feel crushing at first. It means you can no longer blame your unhappiness entirely on circumstances or other people. It means accepting that you have been complicit in your own abandonment, that the prison you inhabit has bars you helped construct. But hidden within this uncomfortable truth is the key to your liberation. If you participated in creating this suffering, you also have the power to dismantle it. The way forward requires a specific kind of bravery. Not the courage of grand gestures or dramatic changes, but the quiet fortitude to sit with what you find uncomfortable about yourself. To notice when familiar patterns emerge and resist the urge to immediately defend or deflect. To feel the rage without immediately justifying it or pushing it down. To acknowledge the fear without letting it dictate your choices. Start paying attention to what throws you off balance. When something triggers an outsized emotional response, resist the temptation to explain it away or focus on external causes. Instead, get curious about what old wound just got touched, what buried truth just got too close to the surface. These moments of activation are not interruptions to your growth. They are invitations to it. Your suffering has been trying to teach you something essential. Every crisis, every breakdown, every moment when the pain became too loud to ignore was an opportunity to finally turn and face what you have been fleeing. The discomfort you feel is not punishment for being flawed. It is your psyche's last resort, the only tool left that might convince you to stop running and start seeing. Pain, when understood correctly, is not your obstacle. It is your portal. It marks the exact location where healing needs to happen, where truth needs to be acknowledged, where integration needs to begin. The suffering persists not because you are broken beyond repair, but because there is still something crucial you need to recognize about yourself, something that will not be ignored any longer. There comes a moment, often unannounced, when something shifts. Not through force or dramatic revelation, but through a quiet surrender you did not plan. You stop fighting what you find inside yourself. The exhaustion of maintaining the performance finally outweighs the fear of being seen as you are. In this unexpected softening, something that has been clenched for years begins to release. This is not about becoming someone new or better. It is about ending the war with who you have always been. You stop categorizing parts of yourself as acceptable or shameful, worthy or broken. The anger you spent years suppressing is just anger, an energy that wants to move through you rather than define you. The fear you tried to eliminate is simply fear, information about what matters to you rather than evidence of weakness. The sadness you pushed away is only sadness, a natural response to loss that was never allowed to complete its cycle. When you finally allow these rejected pieces to exist without judgment, something unexpected happens. They lose their power to control you. The rage that once erupted without warning becomes a signal you can read and respond to consciously. The anxiety that paralyzed you transforms into discernment about genuine threats versus imagined ones. The shame that kept you small reveals itself as old programming that no longer serves who you are becoming. This process of integration is subtle and ongoing. You begin to notice the moments when you are about to betray yourself, and sometimes, not always, you make a different choice. You feel the familiar urge to say yes when you mean no, and instead you pause. The words that would usually flow automatically remain unspoken while you locate your actual truth. It feels awkward at first, this honesty. You worry about disappointing others or appearing difficult. But gradually, you discover that speaking from your center creates a different kind of relationship, one based on reality rather than pretense. The people in your life respond to this shift in various ways. Some appreciate the authenticity and move closer. Others, accustomed to your compliance, become uncomfortable with this version of you who has boundaries and needs. This sorting process can be painful, but it is necessary. You are learning that not everyone deserves access to you, that protecting your energy is not selfishness but wisdom. The relationships that survive this transition become deeper, while those built on your self-abandonment naturally fall away. Looking back, you begin to see your suffering differently. What felt like punishment or bad luck reveals itself as a precise guidance system. Every breakdown occurred exactly when you had drifted too far from your truth. Every crisis arrived at the moment when change could no longer be postponed. The pain you cursed for years was actually trying to save you, forcing you toward a confrontation you would never have chosen willingly, but desperately needed. This understanding does not erase the difficulty of what you endured. The years of confusion and anguish were real, but now they gain meaning. You were not randomly suffering. You were being slowly, painfully, relentlessly pushed toward wholeness. The discomfort was the friction of a false self being worn away, revealing something more genuine underneath. What you thought was falling apart was actually falling together. Living from this place of integration changes everything in ways both large and small. You stop performing emotions you do not feel. You cease explaining yourself to people who have no real interest in understanding. You notice when interactions drain you and begin limiting exposure to those situations and people. This is not about becoming cold or withdrawn. It is about finally having enough energy for what truly matters, because you are no longer hemorrhaging it through constant self-betrayal. The authenticity that emerges is not comfortable in the way you imagined peace would be. It requires ongoing vigilance, continuous choosing, moment-by-moment decisions to honor what is true rather than what is easy. You still feel fear when you speak up, still experience doubt when you set boundaries, still question yourself when you disappoint someone who expected your compliance. But now you move forward anyway, understanding that discomfort is not a sign you are doing something wrong. Often it is confirmation you are finally doing something right. What arrives in place of constant suffering is not unbroken happiness, but something more sustainable. A baseline of okayness that does not depend on external circumstances aligning perfectly. You are no longer waiting to feel whole once you achieve the next goal, or resolve the next problem. The wholeness is already here, found not through addition, but through acceptance of what has always been present, including the parts you spent years wishing away. But this awareness brings a new kind of responsibility. Once you see how you have participated in your own suffering, you cannot unknow it. Ignorance is no longer available as refuge. You must choose over and over whether to honor this understanding or retreat into familiar patterns. Every day presents opportunities to either continue growing or contract back into the smaller version of yourself that felt safer because it was known. The truth is that becoming whole is not a destination you reach and then remain at forever. It is a practice, something you return to repeatedly because the pull toward old patterns never completely disappears. You will still catch yourself people-pleasing, still notice moments when you abandon your truth for temporary peace, still fall back into behaviors you thought you had outgrown. The difference is that now you recognize what is happening more quickly and can course correct rather than spiraling into months or years of self-betrayal. This is the real work, not achieving some final state of enlightenment, but developing the capacity to notice when you drift and gently bring yourself back. To observe without harsh judgment when you slip into old roles, to forgive yourself for being human, to begin again as many times as necessary. The goal is not perfection, but presence. Not fixing yourself, but accepting yourself. Not eliminating discomfort, but learning to move through it with awareness rather than resistance. Your suffering was never meaningless, though it often felt that way. It was the crude but effective tool your psyche had available to get your attention, to force confrontation with truths you were determined to avoid. Now that you have looked, now that you have begun the process of integration, the pain no longer needs to scream quite so loudly. It still speaks, but more gently, more specifically, guiding rather than punishing. What you do with this understanding determines everything that comes next. You can take what resonates and then gradually drift back into unconsciousness, letting the old patterns reclaim their territory. Or you can make the harder choice to remain awake, to keep facing what is uncomfortable, to continue the work of becoming whole, even when it would be easier to fragment again. Only you can decide which path you will walk, and you will need to make that decision not once, but continuously, in small moments that seem insignificant, but accumulate into the shape of your life.